Watching the Cannabis Broadcasting Group here at cbgtv.com. Opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician. This show is a rebroadcast of the Green Crush podcast with Alan Park. Heard on 420radio.ca and seen on cbgtv.com.
You see, the hidden issue, and it need not be hidden among us, the hidden issue, the government always tries to paint itself as the mother hen, concerned about her errant chicks. And so to keep you from crashing into other people on the freeway, to keep you from leaping out of buildings or committing suicide, we have to control these drugs. As a matter of fact, this is absurd. More people die because of alcohol than all illegal drugs combined in a given year. The government is not your friend on this issue. The government is very concerned to control the mass mind. And marijuana, my God, since the British Commission on Hemp, which was in 1889, I believe, the British East India Company commissioned a study of hemp. They have spent millions and millions and millions of dollars to find something, anything, you name it, wrong with cannabis. There is nothing wrong with cannabis. It is the most thoroughly tested, pawed over, and examined drug in human history. And they just come up with the lamest stuff. I mean, they tell you, you're going to have tits. Give me a break. They say you won't be motivated in your job. Like your job is supposed to be the sine qua non against which all things are to be measured.
And when I get a training bra.
Yeah, right. And I think people on our side of this question have been tremendously naive, because people just think we just have to convince them that it's harmless. It ain't harmless. It is a knife poised at the heart of dominator values. It would make the modern industrial assembly line, political loyalties, the macho image projection, all of these little tricks that they're running are severely eroded by cannabis. And they will stop at nothing to eradicate it. Look at the budget of the DEA. What are they doing? They're giving 65% is dedicated to cannabis eradication. Heroin gets 20% and coke gets all the rest. It's demonstrably absurd the way the money is spent unless you have a secret agenda of some sort. And if your agenda is to suppress the evolution of unwanted social attitudes in the American public, then you have to keep your eye on cannabis very, very closely.
I think I am. Therefore I am. I think.
Of course you are, my bright little star. I've miles and miles of files, pretty files of your forefathers' fruit. And now to suit our great computer, your magnetic ink.
I'm more than that. I know I am. At least, I think I must be.
There you go, man. Keep as cool as you can. Face piles of trials with smiles. It riles them to believe that you perceive the web they weave. And keep on thinking free.
And that spells of the best. Fine stereo.
Alan,
Ladies and gentlemen.
you were having a nightmare. What if it's true? Ladies and gentlemen,
Alan, it's a possibility, isn't it?
the very word secrecy is repugnant
Secrets.
in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers
Constant, extreme danger.
which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger
Extreme danger.
that an announced need for increased security
This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park.
will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
You're crazy.
And no officious, high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes.
Isn't the Pentagon suspicious that all the buildings would blow up?
Or to withhold from the press and the public
I think you're just looking at things for the first time.
the facts they deserve to know.
You've had your whole f***ing life to think things over. What good's a few minutes more gonna do you now?
The facts they deserve to know. They deserve to know. Deserve to know. Deserve to know.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Maybe it's yesterday for you, depending on what you've been doing lately. Welcome to Green Crush Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park, episode 29, 101.
Facts they deserve to know.
And when we say elevated existence, we are talking, of course, about people who can see through the veil and realize the veil is nothing more than a thin piece of fabric. And a lot of times that fabric is created from woven strands of delicately articulated bullshit. And those folks have been running the show for a long time now, so now it's time for us to run the show. Welcome again. This is episode 29, 101, Green Crush 29, Conspiracy Queries 101. 101. So that means you're going to learn something. I hope so. I learn something every day on this topic. And boy, I have learned a lot of things this week. Let's get a couple of bits of personal business out of the way. Tomorrow I'm getting some tests done again. I'm getting restaged. What does that mean? That means when you have cancer, or when you've been diagnosed with cancer but still can't find any signs of it, in my case. Wonder why that is. It's time to take another look. It's been a year since I laid down on a slab and done the CT scan and everything else. It's a little more hardcore than my monthly blood tests, which I've been scoring fantastically well on. We're trying to get some money together because I need to go to a different jurisdiction outside of Ontario. Maybe a little day trip down to Buffalo, New York, just over the border, maybe over to Quebec, somewhere else. And I want to walk in there and say, oh, I'm feeling a bit strange in the old tum-tum. I wonder if we can run a battery of tests. And if it's in the States, of course, I'll have to pay a lot of money, but I'll get it done that afternoon between shopping at the Galleria and then returning there for some kind of evening movie, perhaps. That's how easy it is when the bucks talk down there. But I really want to get checked out from a clean slate. If I go back into the system from where I am currently crawling out of. They go, oh, you have stage 4 cancer, blah, 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 blah. And they just get right back into the old groove. I'd like to hit up a medical professional who has no idea of the history just to see where that would go. So that's a little bit of a pipe dream pet project. And of course, the finances for that I am hoping and working towards will materialize this year, 2018. And it'll be a fascinating follow-up. I also need to say that a reporter from the CBC who did attend the Kathleen Wynne town hall back on November 20th, 2017, where I took the premier to task and she promised we'd have a continuing conversation and now has rendered herself mute, which, oftentimes is a blessing. This gentleman has contacted me a couple of times over the past few months, and it looks like maybe they're going to interview me. So, of course, as a former CBC television network performer and a former radio network performer, I am looking forward to what they're going to say and do. They want to investigate this by speaking with my doctors, and it'll be interesting how I can arrange to get the first one on board, because he doesn't even know I'm still alive. He gave me the shortened time frame, and if I've even ever crossed his mind once, he realizes the reason I don't go to visit him anymore is because, as he so intelligently predicted, I died in December of 2014. So I'm looking forward to an appointment with him. I would say probably more than the CBC is. So that'll be something that we can look forward to, and I'll tell you about later. Are you a podcast subscriber? Do you listen to this show? Are you listening to me ask you this question right now? In case you are, I implore you, please follow our socials, as I have been told they are called, at Green Crush Pod, at Green Crush Pod, all one word, all lowercase, at Green Crush Pod, for a chance to win the items that our guest today will be bringing in with him. We have a studio guest today, folks. It's been a while. I think Jody Emery was the last one some time ago. And Nathan Woodworth is a CEO of JWC. Now, you maybe don't know what that means, but you will soon, because we have him on the show today. Nathan is the CEO of James E. Wagner Cultivation, and it's the first legal facility out of the Ontario region of Waterloo, Kitchener-Waterloo area. We are excited to learn more about their aeroponic grow techniques, and they have a fascinating history. So these folks grow. They are, I suppose, a licensed producer, and we know I haven't always had the best history with the inherent scammery. Not to say that our guest today has any of that going on, but overall the big picture is not so great. I am to be convinced. So hopefully that will happen at some point, that I will be convinced. But I do like this gentleman. We have spoken on the phone. We have met briefly here at the studio, and he will be coming in shortly. And he has some things to give away. And so do hook up with our socials at Green Crush Pod to find out all about those. This is episode 29101. Let's cut right to the science of some fantastic stuff. Now, people always say,
oh, it's anecdotal. You're lying because it's only an anecdote.
Oddly, tons of those people also believe in the Bible, which is like a series of anecdotes. And they will happily tell you, on the one hand, that you're full of shit because you're speaking an anecdote, and they know this because they believe in the Bible. Notice I'm not even sure why that happens. It's just amazing me. It's kind of like two different. It's a cognitive dissonance is what it is. You can't criticize the anecdotal nature of a story and then wave a Bible in someone's face and tell them it's all true. It's one or the other, and yeah, so let's take it to the science so it's a little less anecdotal for folks to understand. This is in PubMed.gov. ncbi.nlm.nih.gov. PubMed. It's the U.S. National Library of Medicine and National Institutes of Health. So not exactly fitting into the what is often termed fake news. And usually fake news is a term coined by people against something they don't want to pay any attention to. And so they call it fake news, and they therefore write off the entire publication. So that makes no sense to me, because a lot of times in fake news, or whatever they call fake news, are real stories. We've all known the National Enquirer for years has been somewhere between 10 and 12% true. And in fact, they were the ones who broke the John Edwards sex scandal story back in when Hillary Clinton fell to Obama, the first time of Obama's run. John Edwards was in there too, and the reason he fell off the wagon was because the National Enquirer broke a story that later all the mainstream news news sources picked up. So I don't know how you can say, oh, I read some stuff in there that's not true, ergo, everything in there, even stuff I haven't read, is untrue. But a lot of these people are out there making comments on social media and sometimes policy in the halls of power. So that's a problem for everybody. If you don't know what Project Mockingbird is, and we'll get into this in the second half of the show, the Conspiracy Queries portion of the show. If you don't know what Project Mockingbird is, and you're unfamiliar with it, and let's take it another step, if you've kind of heard of it and said, it's all bullshit, you really don't have any intellectual or moral standing to go on and judge and talk about fake news. It's kind of like not knowing anything about eggs, never heard of them, maybe even don't believe in them, and then you're going to go tell Anthony Bourdain how to make an omelet. So if you're bitching and moaning about fake news and you don't know what that is, if you don't know what Project Mockingbird is, and I'm not saying if you know what Project Mockingbird is, now you're fully qualified to talk about it, and that there aren't fake news stories here and there well planted amongst the real ones. But if you really can't talk about it with any authority or any sensibility. So go back to telling people who do know about it, about their tinfoil hats and their other facts that they don't seem to want to share with you because you don't want to listen to them. All right, so now the science of the National Library of Medicine. Crystal structure of the human cannabinoid receptor CB1. Sounds like an anecdote. Sounds like bullshit to me. Well, here it is in the U.S. National Library of Medicine. I cannot wait to show this to my doctor tomorrow. The abstract reads as follows. Now listen, I'm not a doctor or a scientist, but I do have these facts in front of me, so I'm going to take them relatively slowly because they're super important, because it's how you heal from cancer when you have cancer and you take cannabis. And heal doesn't mean cure, so put your legal books down for a minute and listen to this good information. Cannabinoid receptor 1, CB1, which you have in your body, by the way, is the principal target of delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, also known as THC, a psychoactive chemical from cannabis sativa with a wide range. I thought there was indica in there too. There must be, but hey, hang on. With a wide range of therapeutic applications and a long history of recreational use. CB1 is activated by endocannabinoids and is a promising therapeutic target for pain management, inflammation, obesity, and substance abuse disorders. It's dangerous. If you want to stay out of shape and you want to stay messed up on substances, yeah, I guess it's dangerous. And if you profit from selling substances that people abuse, then you also don't really want cannabis to be proliferate. Here we present the 2.8, a crystal structure of human CB1. in complex with AM6538, a stabilizing antagonist synthesized and characterized for this structural study. The structure of the CB1 AM6538 complex reveals key features of the receptor and critical interactions for antagonist binding. So it's going to stick onto the thing that's a problem. In combination with functional studies and molecular modeling, the structure provides insight into the binding mode of naturally occurring CB1 ligands, such as THC and synthetic cannabinoids. This enhances our understanding of the molecular basis for the physiological functions of CB1 and provides new opportunities for the design of next-generation CB1 targeting pharmaceuticals. So if I can read that right, it means, hey, this shit really works. Let's synthesize it into a drug and make even more money on it than we were before. Or you could just take it straight up. Here's another one. The cannabinoid delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol mediates inhibition of microphage chemotaxis to Rantes CCL5 through the CB2 receptor. We talked about CB1, now here's the CB2. The chemotactic response of murine peritoneal macrophages was inhibited significantly following pre-treatment with THC. So this is important because so many people who just want to start understanding this, the first thing they will say, courtesy of their religious conditioning or their rather limited educational awareness is there any way I can get this thing to help me without having, if we can get it without the THC, is that possible? Yeah, it's possible, but are you telling your doctor that you only want like half of whatever the cocktail soup is in your chemotherapy? No, you're not. No, you're just taking that in and going bald and puking and having a wonderful old time while your mind tells you that, you're a better person for not imbibing in THC. Please don't make this mistake with your life, okay? It's a really huge mistake. Shuck your conditioning. Most of it comes from people who lie, and for a living. So THC is the major psychoactive component in marijuana. The significant inhibition of this chemokine-directed migratory response was obtained also when the full cannabinoid was used. The full cannabinoid. So tell your pastor who's uptight and doesn't know what the hell he's talking about unless he's cracking off about a specific phrase in the Bible, if he has the moral compunction to look down upon you for using THC, well, that's kind of like criticizing you for using a sharpened blade when you bother to cut something. Oh, you could hurt yourself with that knife. Yeah, that's why you learn how to use it. So please get off of that hump, will you? There's a lot of people still asking me every single time. I had a walk the other day with my dog, and this woman, gee whiz, she didn't want to hear about this stuff for her dead and dying dog. Well, the doctor said he's already, Have you tried this? Well, I've heard about it. Is there any way to get it without THC? I can barely take it anymore. These are fairy tales, folks. We are working from the bottom up to create a seismic shift in understanding the construct of lies and fictions that you have been held under spell of. I was on a Facebook thread yesterday. I couldn't comment on it. Somebody brought me into it to have a look, and it was quite shocking. It wasn't one I was usually involved in. It was a person I don't know. I had to stop reading it because this was an entire thread of people going, I don't know why anybody wants that stuff anyway. It's all bad for you. And just the height of ignorance, well-articulated ignorance, which makes it even more dangerous. Back to this. Significant inhibition of this chemokine-directed migratory response obtained when the full cannabinoid was used. The CB2 receptor selective ligand exerted a robust inhibition of chemotaxis, while the CB1 receptor selective ligand had a minimal effect. The THC-mediated inhibition was reversed by the CB2 receptor-specific antagonist, but not by the CB1 receptor-specific antagonist. In addition, the THC treatment had a minimal effect on the chemotactic response of the macrophages. Sorry, I said that again, macrophages. Collectively, these results suggest that cannabinoids act through the CB2 receptors to transdeactive migratory responsiveness. Now, I've read this a couple of times, but it's still a mouthful, no doubt. Furthermore, the results suggest that the CB2 receptor may be a constituent element of a network of G-protein coupled receptor signal transductional systems. I'd like to see that on a t-shirt. Inclusive of chemokine receptors that act coordinately to modulate macrophage migration. Now, you're probably wondering, what the hell's a macrophage? So here it is. Yeah, it's a lot of work, man. It's some heavy lifting here, but gee whiz, that's how I got out of trouble. This chapter presents the methodology for the quantification of macrophage and monocyte chemotaxis in vitro and in vivo, and discusses the factors that are chemotactic for macrophages. Okay, here's what a macrophage is. Phagocytic. It's a phagocytic wandering cell with intracellular digestive properties, and it promotes wound healing by eliminating tissue debris. And boy, don't you have a lot of that going on when you have cancer. And fibrin deposits, or fibrin fibrous. It's going to be fibrin deposits. So that's what a macrophage is. Basically an internal cellular vacuum cleaner sucking up the shit and getting rid of it. So get on the THC. Stop listening to people who tell you don't need it. They're coming from fear. Even the mainstream news knows all about this. They just don't talk about it very often. That is the problem. So let's just do a quick reminder. We're going to have our guest coming in shortly. Man, I only got into the science of this thing a little bit. Now look how long it's taken to get this machine booted up. Here we go. Sorry about the sniff there. I didn't mean to do that. Good. Where are we here? Oh, yeah. Let's get to know some of this shit, right? That's what we got to do. We got to get to know this shit. Cannabis, it's a medical miracle. Am I reading about this on a pamphlet somewhere? No. This is The Guardian. Cannabis is a medical miracle. It's official. Hey, if you've listened to every single one of these shows, you've already heard this. But if you're a fan of all kinds of pop music, you've already heard that song more than once too, so listen to this again. Cannabis is a wonder drug capable of radically transforming the lives of very sick people according to results of clinical trials of the drug. You know, the research everyone says that hasn't happened yet. Tests sanctioned by the British government are proving far more successful than doctors, patients, and cannabis campaigners ever dared hope. Some of the patients are simply calling it a miracle. Taking the drug, which is still illegal for doctors to prescribe, has allowed a man so crippled with pain that he was impotent to become a father. A woman paralyzed by MS to ride a horse for the first time, and it goes on. And this article came out 16 years ago. I started reading it 3 years ago, when the article was only 13 years old.
There's no research on this.
Shut up. Yes, there is. All kinds of research. And The Guardian now has a cannabis column for grown-ups. Alex Halperin is going to has kicked off a conversation and invites your questions. So if you want to talk to Alex Halperin and be an adult talking about cannabis in what's considered to be a mainstream publication of some repute by many, her handle is at Alex Halperin, at AlexHalperin. Talk to her, ask her a question, quickly buzz through here. Turns out the conservative senators in Canada say the police won't be ready for high drivers by Canada Day deadline. And there's Justin punting the date one more time, as he so often does. That's what a conservative senator says. Senator Claude Carignan speaks about legislation on dealing with driving under the influence of drugs. One of the most terrible things that can ever happen in the history of the world. And so, the Liberal government has earmarked $36.4 million to teach Canadians about the perils of pot. Hey, why don't you teach us about the good stuff, too? Or does that run counter to the program? Real quick now, I'm going to bring our guest in just a minute, and I hope he hears me when I bring this up. This is a little bugaboo of mine. Maybe we'll kick things off talking about this. Our guest is in the studio now. He can hear me. This is from the local paper, YorkRegion.com. Smallish paper. Why am I talking about it? Because students were there listening to a panel discussion during a Catholic District School Board conference addressing drugs and alcohol and the impact of legal marijuana. Who did they bring in there to talk about it? A cop. For decades, the issue of kids smoking pot was relegated to the shadows. Everyone knew some students indulged, but few dared discuss it. Bullshit. We were talking about it all the time in high school. So, first sentence is wrong. You can't trust the whole story. Here we go. Now, recreational marijuana is being made legal, and educators, police, and mental health workers say it's time to talk about it. How about talking to some of the people that have had medical conditions and benefited from it? Would you like to talk to them? No, you would not. This week, the York Catholic School Board gathered students together at Aurora Board headquarters to shine a light on the issue. It's one way of looking at it. Shining a light. If I'm not mistaken, that's a Masonic code term, giving students a chance to ask the experts about the drug and what new laws mean to them. Were they also asking about how it can help cannabis and microphages and tetrahydrocannabinol and the necessary means of using all of it to get rid of your illness? No, they weren't talking about that, no. What is the impact of legalized marijuana for law enforcement and the criminal justice system? That's the first question. Doug McCrae, York Regional Police, says, for the first little while, I think we'll see a rise in impaired driving. But there's a misconception among youth that it'll be a free-for-all. It absolutely will not. Instead of being a criminal offense, it'll be more like a traffic ticket, trying to keep you out of the courts. We haven't even been handed down any legislation yet, but $46 million is set aside to educate public and institutions over the next 5 years. Educate. My next question would be, sir, Mr. Police Officer, are you at liberty to tell us your interpretation of the word, the definition, education, versus the word indoctrination? None of that's in this article. And then it asks how an officer tests if a driver is under the influence. Where's the part I really wanted to get? Oh, yeah. It says here, when there's initial stop of a vehicle, the officer questions the driver, takes note of any slurred speech, redness of eyes, odors, looks for paraphernalia, roaches, joints, minute trace of marijuana tobacco. What? It's not even tobacco. What do you mean marijuana tobacco? That's like caramel chocolate. What? At that point, an officer may ask the person to walk a straight line, put a finger to a nose, and ask a person to tilt his head back and estimate 30 seconds. If those tests are failed, the person is taken to the station for tests on heart rate, blood pressure, temperature, pupil dilation, and urine. Toronto is doing a pilot project with a litmus test that's being used in Australia to determine what type of drug you're on to eliminate the walking at the side of the road, that we may all end up with that method eventually. Offenders will be required to stay overnight in jail until they've sobered up. There will be an immediate license suspension for 90 days. The car will be impounded for 7 days, and legal fees can start at $10,000. What's funny to me is, and I'll get back to this later, we're going to bring our guest on now, but what's funny to me is it says they're going to put you in jail overnight until you've sobered up. But on the other hand, if you smoked yesterday or the day before or perhaps a week or two before, you will still be possibly testing high enough with the cannabis substance in your body to test positive. But they're going to let you sleep it off overnight, but you can't tell them at the outset, oh, no, that was weeks ago. It's just still in my system because it's a fucking food. And you don't know that, officer. So the rest of these questions go on. We will get back to it a little bit later. What's more dangerous, driving under the influence of marijuana or alcohol? Why is the proposed minimum age for pot so low when studies show that until 25 your brain is still under development? Cop says the reason the government thinks this is the right age is because if it's any older, youth will buy it off the street. And what's on the street, in our experience, is almost always laced with something else, increasingly with fentanyl. Okay, first of all, where did fentanyl come from? Go arrest the people that are putting that into the system. Go arrest the people that are prescribing it. This is incredible to me. This entire... One more question, one more answer. Listen to this one. This is my favorite one on the whole thing. Just reveals the cartoon nature of the propaganda spew they're throwing at us to condition everybody further. And this is why I'm so glad people listen to this show at all. It says here, this kid, how long after you smoke pot do the effects linger in your system to impact driving? This particular cop says, it's a very complicated substance because it does stay in your body. You mean like vitamins? And if you're a regular user, this cop says, if you're a regular user, you're going to experience impairment for a longer period of time. Wrong answer, dummy. No, you're not. Actually, what happens is your body becomes acclimatized to it, and you need a higher and higher dose as it goes along to obtain any kind of high effect. So, wow, I don't know why these folks are the first people anybody jumps to get any kind of factuality. They have an agenda. They should never have been the initial consultees once we went to legalized anyway, because it should be decriminalized, and these people are making up bullshit so they can keep the system going. The system of incarcerations, etc. You erase every man-hour off of every police ledger that had anything to do with cannabis, all of a sudden, we're looking at lower police budgets, maybe not as much hiring for the next election, an entire shift in the way we run ourselves as a society. So, with that fury simmering inside me, let me just welcome to the show Nathan Woodworth. Nathan is the CEO of James E. Wagner Cultivation. Do we have Nathan on camera at all? Is he visible? Because this is out of my scope as a host. I really don't know what's going on with that. Nathan, thank you for coming in today. It's a crummy day. Did you drive in all the way from Waterloo? Is that what happened?
We did, absolutely. But thank you very much for having me
Oh,
on.
let's just, one more time, say that again.
We did absolutely drive in from Waterloo. You know,
Do we have him? We don't have you there. What's going on here? This is a live show, folks. What's going on with... Oh, here we go. One more time.
I was just saying that we did drive in from Waterloo. A bit of a poor day for a drive, but we're happy to be here. Thank you very much for having me on.
Well, I'm happy to have you here also because you're the first person I've had in that's had anything to do with a grow op, a grow facility, if you will. And I want you to take us through it. But before we get to that, we want to get to a little bit of history. I always do this because the non-users of us, the people that don't like it, the people that don't want it, the people that say it's bad, at some point, a lot of those people switch over and they get involved in it for one reason or the other. And it's always nice to have someone tell us, you know, transition from when you weren't using it or having anything to do with it into how you got to that.
Perfectly happy to. You know, JWC, James E. Wagner Cultivation, we named the company after my grandfather. And it was when I was 12 years old on his farm near Tilsonburg that I saw my first cannabis plant. So it has been a part of my life for quite some time. But I was raised in a household very much against the use of cannabis and any drugs at all. So it was a difficult transition for me in moving over to using cannabis, first recreationally, as in high school, as you mentioned earlier, talking about it a lot. So
you
did we.
Talk about it,
yeah,
right?
There was a lot of conversations about it.
Oh, we don't talk about it in high school ever. I mean, why do they say things like that? That's so ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, it's part of the propaganda machine, as you say. So, but from there, I moved into using it medicinally. I had a chronic pain condition. I suffered from severe chronic intractable migraines. I had migraine attacks all the time.
How old a man were you at that point?
Well, it began when I was 13. I had my first migraine attack. And I didn't, I started using cannabis when I was 17, and I didn't notice a correlation between the lessening of my migraine attacks and my cannabis use for some time. But by the time I was 25, I was completely disabled by my migraines.
And what does that mean? You couldn't couldn't see, you couldn't do anything?
Well, there's a lot of symptoms that come along with migraines in addition to extreme pain. Disorientation, a reduction in IQ or intelligence, problems with everyday problem solving, but a large part of it was disorientation, difficulty moving, loss of visual acuity. When I have a severe migraine, I lose all vision on my left side, so I go partially blind, and this limited me from many daily activities, and it made participation in general flow of society virtually impossible. To exacerbate the situation, I was prescribed over the course of a decade, pretty much every neurologically active drug that you can imagine.
Can you name some?
Oh, well, gabapentin. It's difficult after all these years to remember all of them.
Sure.
Of course, amitriptyline. I took naratriptan and sumatriptan and all the triptan class drugs. There were some that had a marked reduction in my ability to think clearly. On one in particular, I gained 70 pounds. Basically, I was passed from chronic pain specialist to chronic pain specialist across Canada in order to try and deal with what they perceived as an entirely neurological issue. And nothing helped. So in the end, they put me on opiates in order to help control the pain. And by the time I was 25, that wasn't working anymore. And I went
worked for a little bit.
It worked for it. Would this is the nature of opiates.
Yeah.
They'll work for a time.
Yeah.
And then you become used to them, and it doesn't work anymore.
And then you need more.
Exactly.
And here we go.
When I was 25, I went to my neurologist and I said, "Look, it's not working anymore. What can we do?" And he said, "Well, we're going to up your dose, but be careful because the amount of opiates you're on could kill a person who isn't used to taking them." And that was a wake-up call. And that was when I started looking to other remedies and focusing on cannabis. For a time, I was an extremely high-level user of cannabis, consuming well north of half an ounce a day in order to control my pain. Which was very expensive. So I began growing my own, and with the help of my primary neurologist, who was a great guy and tried everything he could to help me, I got a prescription under the MMAR.
And that was back in what year?
That would have been
90s?
in 2007 or 2006.
2007.
So a little over a decade ago.
Yeah.
I had been using it for some time as an adjunct, but it was when I stopped the opiates that I really started to focus on it. And I realized, hey, this alone can give me what I need. And first I started using it at a high level in order to control the pain. The correct mix of THC and CBD, high THC, mid-range CBD, does have, in my opinion, a marked effect on the experience of pain. But in the end, what helped me the most was over the course of a few years, I began to increase the amount of CBD. CBD has been shown to have the ability to increase neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to regenerate itself. Migraines are a matter of trigger and response. Something in your environment will cause the cascade effect, which is a migraine, and then you become more susceptible over time. The high level of CBD, the constant use, allowed my brain to reprogram itself to the point where now I rarely encounter migraine attacks. I get them less than twice a month. This is a completely life-changing experience for me. It's given me back the ability to function. And I quickly realized in my participation under the MMAR that this was a drug that had remarkable effects and could change people's lives. So we began as a group, my family and I, to pursue the cultivation of cannabis in every way that we could. And we started a collective of patients and growers in Waterloo region. My brother and my wife were some of our first members, and my brother is a PhD candidate in plant biology.
Oh.
He allowed us to set up our grow as a series of studies. We operated out of a couple of dozen different homes in the region, and we were able to study every possible cultivation method available. We kept meticulous records. We structured
Both
this
aeroponic and hydroponic and
well, we began growing just like my grandfather did, soil
in the dirt,
and light and air. But of course, we had to do it inside. And when you're inside, you're dealing with an entirely artificial environment. And this presents a new set of challenges. So we moved on to hydroponics, and we tried all of the different hydroponic methods that are available. In the end, they all had their shortcomings, their drawbacks. There were things that we couldn't learn
in
about the plants.
hydroponics.
Yes, absolutely.
Such as? problems?
I won't get into the intensive detail of talking about the comparison of different hydroponic techniques, but for instance, we can talk about soil versus soilless soil. In a soil technique, what you're doing is creating a living substrate. The decomposition of organic materials within that substrate provides the nutrition for the plant. You have virtually no control. You set up the preconditions for plant growth. And then at the end, you measure the outcome. Right. In a hydroponic soilless soil, you're providing the nutrients to the soil, a soil material like a peat moss or a cocoa coir, right, over the course of the plant's life. This gives you a bit more control. You know what you're feeding into the system, sure, but you don't know what the plant is eating. It's kind of like setting a buffet where you don't know what's being taken away. And every few days, you put the buffet out again, and you hope you're putting the right dishes out on the table, but there's no way to measure it. And this is the basic problem with cannabis cultivation. What we're dealing with is a plant that produces a pharmaceutical-grade outcome. A tomato has 20 to 30 terpenes and flavonoids, the chemicals that give it flavor. The cannabis has been tested at having over 230 terpenes and flavonoids in some case. In addition, it has over 145 phytocannabinoids. So
now that's on a tomato. Those are the things that when you're growing tomatoes, maybe so much more than a store-bought tomato, but when you grab a tomato and then it just has this smell that clings to you, similar, not the same as cannabis, but it clings to you in a similar way, and it just smells.
A tomato plant has its own smell. It produces its own chemicals, certainly.
And those are also terpenes?
Terpenes and flavonoids primarily. There are other chemicals within the tomato plant that produce some of those odor elements that we're talking about. And I wouldn't be confident enough of the chemistry of it.
Oh, that's okay. No, I'm not going to grill you.
My brother's the one who keeps all the science in his head. I just
let's get him in here.
He would not want to appear on any broadcast, I'm afraid. He's sort of more of a shy individual.
Well, neither do I, but I'm stuck with this. Anyway.
Me too.
Yeah.
So cannabis is an intensely complex plant. And so we needed a system that allowed us more control. And this is how we settled on aeroponics. In aeroponics, we deliver nutrition directly to the root mass of the plant. It hangs freely inside an enclosure. There's
How do you stick it on there with no soil, no water? What do you do?
Well, we spray the nutrients directly onto the root mass, and then it's absorbed directly into the root system of the plant. Wow. The fascinating thing about this is reservoir by reservoir, we can measure it at the beginning of a cycle and then 15 minutes later. And we can tell you to the microgram how much nutrition that plant has taken up during that period. Wow. This is an active measure of metabolic activity. This gives us a degree of control over the total plant growth cycle, which is not available using any other cultivation technique. And that's the true advantage of aeroponics, the ability to understand what the plant is doing on an active basis. And that's the drawback of every other cultivation method. We do not have access to that metric.
Okay. Now, I want to get back to the content of these, not to give away family secrets or business secrets, but I want to talk about that later. But I want to ask you about the differences, since you have experience in both, with sunshine-grown cannabis in the dirt. Like you say, you can't control what it eats. It's a buffet, and it takes after its own thing. But it's sunshine photosynthesis. So when you're not doing that inside, what's your whole world about when it comes to lighting? How do you best handle the different phases of the growth of the plant? What do you use for that to give it the best shot in the absence of the sun?
I mean, we test a lot of different lighting systems. We do use a combination of LED and high-intensity discharge lighting. High-intensity discharge, specifically high-pressure sodium, is my favorite lighting to use in the flowering cycle because it has a single-point source of emission, a much smaller surface from which the light is emitted. It has a better penetrative quality. Just as the sun shines all the way through the leaves of the trees above us, in the same way, the right light will shine all the way through the canopy of a plant. When you use a light that's too weak, the buds that grow on the bottom of the plant are deprived of light. We very carefully train our plants so that only about 85 to 95% of the light is caught by the canopy and the rest passes through it. This ensures that all of the buds from the top of the plant to the bottom of the plant are of the same high quality.
Equal distribution of the light.
That's certainly the effort. Yeah.
So what is this sludge then? This thing, whatever it is that you spray onto the roots to guarantee, that you can tell. Like, what do you come up with? What is that? Without giving away, I'm not trying to pry, but I'm very curious.
It's a proprietary mix of nutrients and additives. The key element, the key breakthrough that allowed us to.
It's not that pink slime they were showing us a few years ago.
No, God, no. No, what you're talking about there is a way of keeping the roots sterile. And actually, we don't strive for sterility. Cannabis is a living organism.
Sure.
And so we want to create a living environment. And this is, they do use aeroponics to commercially produce lettuce, but they use an oxidizing agent, bleach or hydrogen peroxide. And when you add that to the water, at the end of a 30 to 45-day cycle, when you take that head of lettuce out, the roots are rotting, they're brown. This is not a healthy plant. Luckily, lettuce doesn't require, that much sustenance in order to achieve what it is. It's a leaf, it's good that way, and it's fine. It produces fine lettuce. But when you're looking at cannabis, again, this intense complexity, we had to go back to the drawing board in order to keep a long growth cycle plant alive. We had to find methods that mimicked what was going on in nature. In nature, roots are kept in a living state by the symbiotic relationship between bugs and other elements that are in the soil. So we look to those bugs and we look to the enzymes that they use to digest the roots, to remove dead roots. And we mimicked those processes in our reservoirs to the point where not only do we have active symbiotic life forms like algae, which grow alongside our cannabis, showing us that our reservoirs are a healthy place to support plant growth, but we've done experiments on plants that can grow for an indeterminate period, like tomatoes. On day 1, we were able to grow a healthy tomato. On day 400, we were able to grow a healthy tomato. So we were able to sustain true healthy plant growth in an aeroponic system indefinitely.
I feel like such a slouch because 10 years ago you started, being sick and using this as a substance. Now you're the CEO of a company that provides. I'm 5 years in from my diagnosis, and
you still have time then. So.
I still got time. I've got to work twice as quickly as you to become your nearest rival.
No, I mean, to be honest, we started in 2013 to process a license, and really what took us there was that we had an active collective of patients and growers. We had people who relied on us under the MMAR, and when they announced the MMPR in 2012, that was a hard few days. To us, it seemed like everything we had built and everything we had worked for, all the people who relied on us, that was all going away.
Okay, this is a government system, the MMAR.
That's right. That was the Medical Marijuana Access Regulations.
Okay.
It was put in place, I believe, in 2001, and it was done as a way to allow individual Canadians to access cannabis under strict regulatory requirements. They had to prove that they had a particular condition. They had to have a medical practitioner sign off. They could get someone else to grow for them personally, or they could grow it on their own. But those were the only ways they could access it.
And then it changed to... Or before it was the MMCPR.
Right now it's the ACMPR. They've changed the acronym so many times. Even I get confused about what it stands for. but in 2012 they announced the MMPR, which was the Medical Marijuana Production Regulations, to be honest.
Right.
Again,
okay, that's okay. It's just that they all bring a different series of rules and regs, and everybody has to abide by those or risk problems.
So the MMPR created a system of commercial production that was going to replace the growing that was happening under the MMAR. So all of our growers and all of our patients who are attached to the individual growers who were doing a great job growing out of their homes using our system, were going to be shut down by this regulation. And that was a hard pill for us to swallow. And then after a couple of days, we looked around and we realized, hey, we've got all the skills we need to become a commercial producer, to do this in a way that can help so many more people than we were able to help under the MMAR. So, it took us better than a year to write a comprehensive business plan that showed all of the different elements of what we were going to do. And we found enough backers to rent a facility. And then my family spent 3 years at this facility cleaning it again and again and again to get it clean enough to do what we needed it to do, working on it every day. For no pay, in order to bring it into reality. In the end, we got one of the least expensive licenses to produce in Canada because we didn't do it because we had a tremendous amount of financial backing. We did it because we believed every day that what we were doing was going to help people because we saw it under the MMAR.
So under the first phase of this business, before you switched over, how many employees did you have?
Under the MMAR, you mean? We had no employees. We didn't
Just
employ
you?
people. People grew and had a relationship with their own patients, which they kept their own records about. We didn't, as a collective, want to interfere in the finances of that arrangement because it created a centralized legal question of what our role was. That's why we called ourselves a collective.
Right. So how many in the collective then? How many people?
Well, it connected with, dozens and dozens. Certainly there were multiple dozens who were officially registered under the MMAR, and many more who were peripherally involved, if you'll allow me to limit my comments to that, with the collective that we had set up.
Okay. And then now, in this company that you are the CEO of, how many employees might you have now?
We have 40 direct employees.
40.
We have a 15,000 square foot facility. We produce approximately 20 kilograms of cannabis every week, and we're ramping up quickly. We have a lease on a 345,000 square foot warehouse. By the end of this year, we'll employ close to 300 individuals, and we're proud to say that by the end of this year, we'll be the largest aeroponic grower of any kind anywhere in the world.
Right. And your previous existence, or up until this point, this is an economic boon we're talking about here. I mean, you weren't there doing this. Now you are. Here are all these jobs. Does the politician representative of your region, is he on board or she on board with this, or is it problematic? Because some of them are okay and they're right into it. Others, they want to fight till the cows come home to make sure it doesn't enter their geographic area.
The municipality has been tremendously supportive of what we're doing. The building that we have a lease on was the original home of the Lear seating manufacturer, and they were a major auto parts manufacturer. And they started there in 1962, and over the course of a 50-year life at that location, they employed as many as 2,000 people at one point.
Right.
When they left...
the Lear airplane. You're talking?
No, this is Lear seating.
Oh, Lear seating.
They're a little bit different.
Yeah, a lot different.
I don't know that they're connected at all, actually. So yes, a lot different. It left a hole in the local manufacturing sector. And this is one of the great things about the way that they're setting cannabis up in Canada. It allows us to bring back some of those manufacturing jobs. In my own opinion, this is not a product that lends itself easily toward international trade. It's better to produce this product where it will be consumed, to grow it where you'll use it. And Canada is a large enough country that many producers are now doing exactly that. They're building production facilities on the West Coast and on the East Coast and in the central areas because they recognize this. They recognize that it's better to grow it where you'll use it, which is a great way to keep jobs in Canada. This is a product that will always need to be produced in our backyard. And we're able to employ, thankfully, a great number of people who, might have otherwise been disenfranchised by the removal of some of these production jobs.
Yeah. It's amazing to me because, so much of the criticism over the years, over the decades, and maybe even longer than that, is that it doesn't bring anything good to the community. It doesn't help anyone. It's nothing but an albatross around our neck and a block against any further development. And everywhere you turn, when you start to really look at it, that's complete fiction. It's been behind creative works. It's been behind ideas that have helped and then gone on to be businesses, and now it's a business itself. And sometime or other, I'd really like to see some of these constituents of how terrible it is atone for this constant preaching of falsehood.
Well, you began right before I came on in talking about that article, and it's the nature of a propaganda machine that it progresses from, in this instance, the war on drugs.
Right.
The individuals who spread that propaganda can never really be held to blame for the words that they speak. They can be held only to blame for the belief they have in those concepts in the long term.
Yeah.
The existence of those ideas is part of everything around us. This is why they bring the police in instead of an expert like yourself. I was going to suggest that you
I'm
volunteer.
no expert, but I certainly would bring something to the game in such a discussion. But these folks never want to have people.
No.
Hey, this guy had these terrible migraine cluster headaches. Now he doesn't.
That's right.
Let's hear how he did it. It's never about that. It's like, well, if you're driving a car and,
and that's in the nature of propaganda.
Yeah, sure.
So it's likely that we'll never see, the people who spread these ideas brought to task for it. Instead, we simply have to be an example of the good that cannabis can do. And that's what you do, and that's what I try to do as well.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: so you are what we would call a licensed producer.
That's correct.
Yeah. And if you've heard some of the earlier shows, you might wonder why you're sitting here right now. I've had a lot of problems with licensed producers, and of course, as far as we can see from your company history, none of these problems that I have exist with your company. Last year, you must be aware of this in the game. So many providers were in trouble for having some kind of substance, usually a pesticide or a mold or what have you. And I really rail against the process of, first, for decades, it was illegal forever, and it's a bad thing, and it can't help you at all, and it's terrible, and we need to get rid of it. Then there's an acquiescence eventually to a government body who are going to work only with licensed producers, and then it turns out not yourself and your company, but so many others of these where you have to deal with them. You have to deal with these folks, and they have these problems. I'll say some names. Metrum had this problem. What's the other company? Organigram. I mean, how dare you even have any kind of pesticides in your facility? All they said was, we don't know how. We don't know how that got in there. You shouldn't even have any inside the building if you're really organic selling these things. And they're still, fighting for their life and trying to retool and rebrand. The very concept of this goes against, I can feel my blood sizzling inside my veins when I think of these things. So I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're the first one. I'd love to get some of these other folks in, but it's kind of a strange maneuvering from this stuff doesn't work to it works, but we're not really going to test it, and we don't really care, and those guys are going to be the ones you have to buy it from the end. It's kind of a slippery slope, a bunch of bad guys involved, I think.
Well, it's a strange dynamic in the industry, and I want to say a couple of things in relation to what you just said. First of all, I'm glad that we don't exemplify some of those negative things that you've seen in the industry, and we certainly do try and deal, well with everyone that is involved. And a lot of the companies that are out there right now have been set up because of the financial aspect of things. Now, there's going to be an evolution in this industry, just as there is in anything. And we're going to see them become, socially responsible and deal directly with their patients and customers in a way which necessarily becomes reasonable. Because, my experience of this industry is not typical. I describe it as from the grow room to the boardroom.
Right.
That gives me a perspective to know that the patient must come first.
And the pain room to the grow room to the CEO room.
Well, that's right. From patient to grower to organizing one of these companies. And, that means that when we deal with our patients who we know have to come to us for medicine, we know that we have to treat them well. We have to provide a medicine which is a cut above, that justifies the existence of this program. And I'm happy to say that we do. Other companies, they use a type of cold pasteurization called irradiation in order to achieve a clean product. Our product is just as clean as irradiated product without the need for any bioremediation. We do not bring any pesticides into our facility. There has never been a trace of anything like that on our plants, and there never will be, because we exercise complete control over the entire system. So there is a reason that they set things up this way. Just because not everyone has proven that over the last couple of years is not yet a good enough reason to give up on the system. Because I have, over the years, bought a fair bit of product from a fair number of people.
Yes.
And I can tell you, not all of it was good for me.
No.
And I don't believe what that article said, that most of it is laced with fentanyl or something like that.
Yeah, I know.
That's nonsense. But
Haven't
on the other
found
hand,
any of that yet. I've not found any
I
of that
have a feeling that would really increase your price per gram.
It's another substance on the market. Why would it be the same price? Yeah, I
Yes.
don't believe that at all.
Well, it's part of that, general propaganda. But nonetheless, the ability to exercise that control, to be certain that that product meets a high degree of quality control, is something that people will in the end find to be of value. And producers like ourselves, and there are others out there, I'm sure we can get some of the others on your show, will prove that this is something that the industry is striving toward.
Okay. Let me ask you this. This is a Joe casual grower question. And of course, this isn't directly about cannabis, but it's about growing.
Sure.
So last year in my yard where I lived, I had a summer garden going on with kale and everything was legal. And And you find that, especially as a non-expert, I'm not an expert in anything, but it's least of all growing gardens. But you find that you're doing the same things over and over again, and then all of a sudden, one plant is it's not happening. Something goes wrong, the leaves turn white and weird, and they curl up, and you're doing the same thing to the whole damn garden. You're putting in water, you're putting in the right soil, and there are these big beds. I had these 6x4 beds, and some of them are problematic, and the one right beside it is no problem.
Yeah.
Now, when you're in a situation like your grow facility, do you ever have problems like that? It sounds to me like once you get your ball up and rolling, it's just, you're on top of it. You don't have these issues.
We don't, but we did. And that was one of the main things that drove us forward in terms of looking at what can we learn about the plant system, how can we do this better. And what it comes down to is that soil, natural soil, is what I call a non-homogeneous substrate. That is to say that...
Well, I've been saying that for years.
There you go, good.
Yeah.
So if you were to take the soil up out of the ground and very carefully cut it into a cube and cut it into sections and perform a dissection, which, by the way, we did for many years, you would find that there are areas that are very different from the rest.
Okay.
And who knows? There could have been a rock under that plant that had a high degree of iron or copper that would lock out other nutrients. We don't know because we don't know what's in that soil.
So once you get your system going, the roots are dangling and hanging there, and you're
identical.
What do you use? Like some kind of spray gun or something?
It's a special spray head, which is attached to a distribution system and run by a single pump for every 2 plants. So it's a system that we've designed to automatically distribute it, and then we use a special timing system called a primary logic controller, which runs all of the circuits in the facility, so that it's actually neat. When you walk into a room, it'll be completely silent, and a few seconds later, it's like a waterfall. All of the spray heads come out
that
at
happens
once.
to me at the supermarket whenever I'm choosing celery. That
Yes,
seems
then
to
you get
be
all
when...
wet. Yeah. It's very similar
Is
to
it
that,
really?
actually, except inside a specially designed enclosure and set up using a very special nutrient solution. And all of this we worked for years to perfect, and to figure out what the best way to do all of these particular tasks was.
That's great. And so now your mom is okay? Does she make cookies with this, or she changed her mind a lot on your...
No, the family in general is really terrifically supportive. Our main founder group consists primarily of Jim's grandchildren. And we're all still part of the business on a regular basis. My sister is the chef. She's a trained chef, and when we had a collective, she would make, all of those sorts of things for the patients in the collective. We hope again to return to it, but it requires, under the current regime, in order to respect the intent of what's being done, it requires a high degree of scientific control. When there have been reports that have shown that, gummies and dispensaries can vary wildly in terms of their medicinal content. We can't have that. At JWC, we need every dose to be the same. So we need to find ways to regulate it. And so we're not doing that right now.
Isn't that easier, though, to do those kinds of regulations when you don't have the man over your shoulder? Like, I think a lot of these dispensaries... I'll give you a real-life example. The other day, a person that I know brought me some things, and they were edibles, and they were cookies, and they were little cakey things and what have you. And it made me laugh, although it's a problem. It made me laugh because on each one of these pouches, it had the CBD count, which is, of course, alleged. Yes. It had the THC count, which was, of course, alleged. But, you kind of believe it. It's like, well, this is...
But isn't that the danger?
It is.
You do kind of believe it.
But these other packets didn't have anything written on them. Yeah. And it's like, okay, this one says 40 of this and 30 of that. This one says nothing. So do I eat half of this, or do I eat a little bit of that one, or do I eat a whole of the, you don't know, right?
As I used to advise my patients under the MMAR, it's best to start with a little bit and then build up to where you're comfortable.
I absolutely agree.
Which I would advise you too. On the other hand, in an unregulated environment, invention is enhanced, the ability to create the new. And that's where we came from with our system, because there was a lot less regulation under the MMAR. But on the opposite side, standardization is better enhanced through a regulatory regime that does watch us, that makes sure that we're doing things right, that comes in and audits us regularly. You use the example of a couple of the other LPs. We might never have known that they were doing what they were doing. If Health Canada hadn't been doing the job they are in making sure that we all stick to the same regulatory requirements.
Okay, I got a quick point and then into a different topic, and that is in the meat industry, there were these meat inspectors that would go around. I'm sure they have them in various countries that are listening to us now. I'd like to welcome our American listeners, our Australian and New Zealand and Irish listeners, and our Portuguese listeners, and a lot of people. Thanks for tuning us in. But back then, these folks were providing a certain caliber of item. These before the dispensaries were full on. You had to buy it at different places. Somebody at the school or what have you. And then the dispensaries came about, and now we've branched off into licensed producers. So let me get your take on dispensaries as a thing. Obviously, you're an LP. And you're very well spoken, and you've got all the experience. You've got everything I like. You're a victim of pain and sickness, and you've turned that around, and you've used that to sort of springboard into a better place. So, what do you have to say about these dispensaries that are constantly facing arrests and seizing their product, and ideologically, I suppose they are your rival. But what's your take on the wave of harsh police activity?
Well, I think that in order to achieve what the government wants to achieve, which is a legal and regulated market, the harsh reality is that gray and black market activity must cease. Now, I hope that those dispensaries which are being operated honorably and with the patient's best interests at heart will find a place in the new regime. But they will not do that by continuing to act against the coming regulatory regime. And unfortunately, that is in the nature of it. That's this decision we faced. We could have continued growing under the MMAR. And as it turns out, we would have been grandfathered in, and we could still be growing under the MMAR.
Right.
But instead, our group made the decision to take what we had learned about the industry and to turn that around and to face the fact that legalization was coming and that we had to adapt to that circumstance. So it's not the most friendly way of phrasing it, unfortunately, because I have enjoyed my experience.
Guns are involved.
And certainly the way that it's being carried out is not how I would prefer for it to be carried out. But in the end, I'm not in charge of the way that the laws of Canada...
No. I'm not asking you to be in charge. I just wanted to get your take on it.
I'm not trying to justify the way the police are dealing with it. What I am simply saying is that the fact remains that these operations must cease. Sad as it may be for their owners and for those who have put passion and effort into creating them, in order for a fully legal environment to be created in Canada, an environment where we can finally move past propaganda and into an era where we can speak openly, freely, and accurately about cannabis, we need legalization to be completed. And for legalization to be completed, gray market activity must stop. Now, we can find better ways to do that, and I think we should. I don't want to see anyone, who's operating with their patient's best interest at heart, having guns waved in their faces. I can imagine nothing worse. On the other hand, it must be, there has to be a solution to the situation.
Well, that's only good for Ontario. I understand your position, but there are other, as the legalization of Canada spreads out, when Justin says, like last year, or maybe it's this year, or he doesn't know where July 1st
August
came
1st,
from, or whatever the hell it is. I don't know where that number, he said that. He said, I don't know where July 1st came from. I really have no idea. The whole country heard it, but he didn't hear it. But in BC, and I've parsed over these laws. We have a friend who will soon be a lawyer. He's articling right now. Harrison Jordan. He's written a lot of great pieces. He's been on the show. He's written for Leafly and Cannabis Daily, I believe. And he says, he details in a recent article that every single province has a different way of handling the incoming federal regs.
Yep.
And in Vancouver, from what I understand, in British Columbia, rather, the whole province, there is some sort of coexistence level set for dispensaries and folks like yourself with these legal dispensaries.
Is, and I'm great that
and they can't have that here, but you can have it there.
Well, and I was speaking to someone earlier today. We were recently out at a conference in Vancouver, and it was very interesting to see how the entire environment around cannabis is different there than it is here.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a cultural thing,
It is.
and it's an unfortunate thing because realistically, there should be the opportunity, in my opinion, for dispensaries in Ontario to attempt to comply with the regulatory requirements to become legitimate operators, and some of them would, just as in Vancouver.
So you're okay with that as,
I
as a
like
notion?
dispensaries. I have no problem with dispensaries. I have a problem.
Okay, he
with,
can stay.
I just have a problem with those who will hold up the final phase of legalization by attempting to flaunt the incoming laws.
Well, I think the mindset of those people, from what I understand, and I think I understand it fairly well, is basic, and that is that if you go by the metric that you're saying is like, hey, this is the new regime coming in and it's not going to be legal anymore. That's the exact same thing as taking us back to 1936 when it's all over the place, and then 1937 when it's the devil's weed and we have to lock it up. So when people have ideas and notions that they say they're going to build some legal constructs, that's why some people don't want to have anything to do with that. That's why there is the fight. That's why cops do bring out guns.
And, in the end, I have sympathy for what amounts to conscientious objectors, those who don't want to comply with the new regime because they see it as being that there's something wrong with it. But the final resolution of those issues is too intellectually heady for me to be able to tackle.
Well, it sounds like time to fire up the bong.
That wouldn't hurt, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because obviously it's a bit of an uncomfortable thing to talk about, and I do need to talk about it because that's what this show is all about, is bringing these facts forward, all of the facts, and letting them get sorted out.
Yeah.
I really have a problem with the hardcore mindset of, well, that's not legal, and that's the way it is. Because so many things that, slavery was legal. Things change over time. And I think after 80 years of being screwed over by a series of lies that culminated on a war on drugs, which is completely fictitious and unfortunately infects the more diseased-minded of us, such as little Jeff Sessions running around there in the States telling everybody that this is the fault of opiates, if there is any, has to do with the ingestion of cannabis. He's got it completely backwards. And I don't know if he's just stupid or has an agenda. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't hamper.
I think he uses column A and column B to his advantage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's amazing. So when are we going to do here? We got some T-shirts, or you brought some kind of thing to raffle
absolutely.
away, right?
We brought a nice wooden
I don't know if we can see the
box,
shirt on.
Actually,
Can we see his shirt at all?
T-shirts.
Nathan's got a cool
everybody
shirt
here at the studio, and then we brought an engraved a lot box. I don't know if anybody out there can hear us and bring it up to show us.
A lot box.
Yeah, and a lot box. A lot is a terrific company. They make some really nice wooden boxes to house all your product, and I wish I would have had one back in the day when I had more opportunity to spend my time on that sort of pursuit, because it's a good way to store and to use your product and to display it. This one happens to be engraved with our logo, which hopefully doesn't do anything to detract from its attractiveness.
Here comes the box now. Is this the box?
This is the box. Yeah,
okay, take us through the box.
Sure.
See what we have in here.
Probably not set up, so I'll have to
that's
quickly
okay.
Set it up and show you.
While you're setting that up, let me just take a little bit of an opportunity here. I have to do a commercial. If you can believe it, I'm going to do a commercial, and as soon as I find it, but that's okay. Nathan's opening a box. He needs to open it to tell us all about it, and I'm getting closer to. Here we go. This is a product called. Let me just do a little. Nathan is working his best to get these bits and pieces apart. Going to tell us all about it. In the meantime, it's a commercial for Extract Craft. Introducing Source Turbo. This is it kind of looks like a blender or a food processor. It's an upgraded crucible design at improved processing time with an added turbo mode, altitude-specific tuning, simple, smart, safe, at-home extraction. It's guaranteed to improve the way you concentrate. That's kind of a joke if you think about the word concentrate regarding cannabis, and what cannabis can do to your mind to help you concentrate. Extract Craft. How does it work? It's a safe, clean, very easy to use appliance that uses vacuum and gentle warming to make extracts and concentrates. Throughout the process, the alcohol is recovered for reuse. That saves a couple of bucks and pays for itself in a very short time. It's a fully enclosed, closed-loop system that restricts odors. Yeah. That's what you need to get away with it in your apartment when they tell you it's the only place you're able to take this stuff in. It restricts odors to almost nothing and makes operation very safe. That's what we're talking about. Use the source to create medicinal and recreational concentrates, alternative medicine, cooking, cocktails, brewing, winemaking, fragrances, and aromatherapy. It was designed with the home user in mind to be an economical, safe, and efficient, convenient alternative to other methods. How do you get the source? Well, it's available online. You have to look it up online. It's once again called extractcraft.com. The store. This thing is $600.
Oh my God, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, but this stuff is going to be making your own extracts, and it's a nice thing to have at home. Looks pretty cool too, sort of like a blender or food processor, not as tall, but it's got an improved processing time. I wasn't even prepared to critique their old processing time. That's the turbo mode though, and altitude specific tuning. I guess that means if you live in Colorado way up there, it functions differently than down here closer to sea level. It's the only at-home extraction appliance in the world that's made simple, smart, and safe for all your extraction needs. It's the source. Extractcraft.com. All right, so now we have a box from you. What do we have here, Nathan?
So this is the box. I don't know if you can see it here, but it's
lovely.
Got the JWC logo engraved
see that?
on the front.
Great.
As you open it up, it has a tray. Whoops.
I'll hold that for you.
Thanks, it's appreciated. Tray comes out and you can do your rolling or preparation on there, whatever method of consumption you might choose. It has a grinder, rolling papers, small storage jars, which are nicely displayed in there, and a couple of tubes for pre-rolls as well, or for you to pack your own. So it's a self-contained little box that you can.
Can I just take that grinder up for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Take a look at that. Oh yeah, that's a nice one. I love these grinders. Get yourself one of these. I don't know if we're allowed to do this or not, but who cares? This at the bottom of this, you're going to have a little catch trap, a little pick, because through that little screen. Oh, it's very nicely machined. I have to say,
not bad. Yeah,
I have to say that's a key. When they don't unscrew, it gets to be a real problem if it's made out of crappy
Generally,
stuff.
I prefer the bigger ones, but
yeah, sure. But it's got to fit in the box.
That's exactly
Nathan,
right,
come on.
yeah.
And then there's your little catcher. Right, that all the good stuff falls through there, and then let's take a look at the teeth, and then we'll put it back in the box. Now, that's your logo there, or that's the logo of the grinder?
That's the logo of the company that makes the boxes.
Oh, okay. It's a logo. Hey, well, I could use one of these and tell folks.
And a lot box.
Ooh, very nice sharp teeth on there, and they don't look like they're going anywhere. This is another problem. If you get a good one of these, you hardly ever have to do anything to it. If you get a crummy one, you're constantly cleaning it out with alcohol, and it's a pain in the butt. This feels like it's going to be a good one.
Fingers crossed.
So thanks for that.
Not a problem.
And this little deal here, if we were playing The Price is Right, and I had to guess, I'm going to say $200.
I mean, we don't do retail pricing on them, but I'm pretty sure MSRP is about 175, something like that.
Oh, so I went over.
Yeah, a little bit, sorry.
All right. Well, that's a cool kit. So how does one obtain something that's not for sale like this?
Well, this one I thought we were giving you to give away.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're giving one away, sure, but
otherwise,
we're not giving one away to everybody that listens.
A number of these that we give them away along with new patient signups at JWC or under certain conditions. My marketing manager is really in charge of how you'd qualify for something like that. But we give away a lot of stuff, T-shirts and lapel pins and all sorts of stuff. This guy, I think, might be at the end of your first year of purchases or with a certain amount of purchase.
Right.
I really am afraid I'm not 100% sure.
Oh, that's okay. So anyway, I just wanted to get a basic idea, but you'd have to be involved with the company at some point.
We're hoping to get more people involved. We want people to try aeroponically grown cannabis. It's not available for most growers. This is the first process that we're aware of in the world that has perfected aeroponics for cannabis.
So you have no rivals of this particular methodology?
Well, there is another producer out in BC who has come recently online who says that he has also developed an aeroponic method, but this is almost all of the major LPs are researching aeroponics because they see the advantages, but they're not there yet. So we're going to be the first to be able to bring our product to market. So this will be the first opportunity for the patients of Canada to try aeroponically grown cannabis from a licensed producer.
Amazing. Well, I'd like to give it a try at some point. Maybe we can come out there and shoot a little stuff and... Seriously,
unfortunately,
it's not legal. Can't
no,
do that?
we're hoping to get the.
I'll put a hairnet on. I don't know what the big deal is.
You're welcome to come out and have a look at the facility.
Oh, okay.
I thought you wanted to try some of the product. People are always asking me for free samples, and I always have to say I'm really sorry, I can't.
No. I meant like it might be great to come out there and take a look at things and maybe do a little interview on site, etc. And we can always play that on the show and use the audio for the podcast listeners and the video for the folks that watch it on YouTube.
No, we could absolutely do that. It's something we can arrange. We're patent pending on the majority of our main technologies, which from the corporate perspective, of course, gives us the protections that we need in order to be able to show people our technologies.
Well, you would have to approve where we're going to shoot. Once again, this isn't about divulging corporate secrets, just trying to get involved in a positive thing. Look, here's what I like about you, okay? And I've said this to so many guests. And if you're listening and you've heard a lot of these shows, Nathan, who is the CEO of a licensed producer and gets access to nice boxes filled with stuff, he's exactly the same as myself and so many of the other guests, including Ross Rebliati, the snowboarder, Don McElroy. She was in the military. And here's the whole story of us, okay? Here's a person having a tough time due to some circumstance, usually a medical one. Ross didn't have that. He had a legal one when they took his medal away for the Olympics. But he's also the only snowboarder whose name I can remember. And so Nathan had these terrible, were they cluster headaches?
Migraine
headaches. I'm sure it's a similar remedy for cluster headaches, a similar usage.
I wouldn't, I'm
not identical, but
so I can't claim it for sure. But
your head
I would
hurts.
try it. Yeah,
and you feel stupid when you have it. But that's also because you can't read, you can't take anything in. It's hard to think. Of course, you're relatively stupid because you just want to shut everything off. But you're a guy who had a hard physical knock. You were a messed up character. You had all this medical issue. I had that. So many other people had that. There were people, Don went through PTSD, so many different people. Okay, it's a bad deal in the card game of life, and yet have been able to take that crummy deal and turn it around into something else. I'd wager heavily that you never would have gotten involved with this had you not gone down that medical road of pain, etc. And to be able to turn things around, not from, oh boy, I've got this terrible condition, I'm doomed because there's nothing that can help it, but an opioid that'll last me comfortably for 3 weeks until I have to crank the dose. We've all found a way to take this bad news. Cheryl Schumann, there's another one down in California. So many of these entrepreneurs and people, and I'm not an entrepreneur other than to bring this information forward, to turn around this bad deal and to get it to a point where you're now helping the economy. You've got a whole purpose in your life. You're employing other people. You know this is a good quality, and you're not selling some widget that ultimately no one needs, but it's fattening your bank account. And I realized I was in that club a while ago, and that so many people who are doing these things, such as yourself and many other people, came at that from a hard knock. And so my hat's off to you for doing that and taking a bad deal and turning it into something positive for yourself and others.
Well, thank you very much.
So I really appreciate that. And to get a hold of this box, folks, it's at Green Crush Pod. Check the socials. Kim's got it all set up. There are different ways to enter. And I would imagine that within, I guess it depends on how many entries we get, but it'll take a couple of weeks, and then I'll announce it on the show who's going to get it. And hopefully it'll be a person that gets great comfort from your product. Where are you going 5 years down the road with your company? Where do you see yourself? Are you getting into edibles? Is that a thing? What are some of the expansion routes you've got in mind?
I mean, we're looking at building a very large facility. As I mentioned, we'll be the largest aeroponic producer of any kind anywhere in the world, but we're not going to stop there. There's a lot of Canadian patients who are going to benefit specifically from aeroponically grown cannabis, and I want all of them to be able to try it. Additionally, I think edibles are great, but they have their drawbacks. Low bioavailability, long time for the dose to take effect. There are next generation treatments which are being developed by some of our partners that could really revolutionize the way that we use cannabis as a medicine. And we're interested in that. We're a technology company. We look at things and try and invent new and better ways to grow and to use and to experience cannabis. And so we're looking into all of those things. And we hope to be a part of that as the legal market unfolds in Canada.
Well, Nathan, thanks very much. That's the best answer I could have expected from anybody. I really appreciate you coming all the way
Thanks
in
very much for
from
having me.
Kitchener-Waterloo. Looks a little bit nicer for the drive back home.
Yeah.
And I've got a few more things to do. You're welcome to stick around, but I really appreciate it. We'll have you back sometime. We do want to come out and take a look at your facility when
I look
time
forward to it.
allows. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nathan Woodruff, folks. He is the CEO of a fantastic company. Look at this. Look at this box. Let me take a look at this box here. I am not eligible to win this box, you bastards. Okay, look at this beautiful thing. Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice quality item. Fantastic. Well done. So you want to get yourself signed up, and JWC is the place. JWC is the place. Now listen, he had to convince his mom, okay? That's always hard work. He had to convince his mom. So pretty soon we're going to take this thing down, this particular episode. But in the meantime, we have a few more things to talk about. Important things surrounding the issues of. Okay, so can you believe this guy on that article? How long after you smoke pot do the effects linger in your system to impact driving? And this guy says, well, if you're a regular user, you're going to experience impairment for a longer period of time. I'm going to break this down one more time for this fool and other people that believe him and his campaign of fiction. Particularly with cannabis oil, which was the thing that I used to turn around my fortunes. If you start with a tiny amount, a pinhead, nothing bigger than this, tiny little thing, you may well get high from that, but if it's small enough, you won't. And you gradually build up your tolerance, okay? This is just basic stuff here. As you gradually build up your tolerance, you're able to take in more. And if you're able to take in more, it stays in your body longer. It doesn't mean you're impaired. So imagine you're taking this little tiny dose, and over time you get to build it up. But let's say you take that little tiny dose, and then you have 5 times that. You have 5 pinheads all of a sudden. You are going to be so high. I don't recommend it in that way because you're not ready for it. You'll be so high, and this is why people say, can I get it without the THC? Well, guess what? You took it wrong. You took it incorrectly. But if you took that much, you would be so high. And yeah, not worthy to get behind the wheel of a car, absolutely. Whereas someone else who's been taking that and surpassed that level and slowly been able to take more and more into their system, they're not high. And so you could test both of those people and find out that one of them has a lot of stuff in their system and they're not high, and the other person has a small amount in their system and they're ripped off of their face. So this is what the police fail to understand. This is what the healthcare bringers and pharmaceutical representatives choose to fail to understand. So you're not going to actually experience impairment for a longer period of time if you're a regular user. In fact, the more regularly you use it, you're more likely to experience less of a high. But ask a cop the wrong question, get the wrong answer. It's exhausting sometimes, I gotta tell you. And you know, you're talking about the police here. You're talking about always choosing a representative of the police. Now, in the States, it's even worse. You know, I mean, half the time you hear about police in the States, they're killing somebody. You don't believe me? Plunk that into YouTube. You can't always trust police. Certainly not in Toronto, where one of them died from a fentanyl overdose. He was on the drug squad. We talked about him. How about this guy? Here's a fella, police officer, and he's a Toronto guy. Wait till you hear this. Where the hell did that story go? Son of a gun. A Toronto police officer in the TorontoSun.com. This is a Toronto police, and the Sun loves cops too, but here's this story anyway. A Toronto police officer, veteran Toronto cop, accused of drinking a dead man's booze on the job. Imagine if this guy has some kind of say in anything. A veteran Toronto police officer is under investigation on allegations he drank liquor and smoked cigars while guarding a dead man. For some reason, the Toronto Sun website keeps cacking out on me here, but here's what this guy did. He's supposed to be guarding some body, some dead body, and he's drinking liquor and smoking cigars. A male officer with some 20 years on the force, so not to be trusted. Just because the guy's a cop doesn't mean automatic trust. Just because he's been on the force 20 years doesn't mean automatic trust. He's alleged to have driven to a northwestern Toronto home where he was assigned to watch a body until the coroner could arrive. Several hours passed, and he consumed the dead man's liquor and smoked his cigars. What a piece of shit. Wowee. Anyway, that guy probably has lots to say about cannabis, too. It's probably a bad idea. That's a bit of conjecture on my part, but gee whiz. These people and their crazy club. Here's an article from the Washington Post. The recently CIA infused with $600 million Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon. So I'm just trying to tighten it up for you as we slide into a more conspiratorial tone for the show, but still all about cannabis and still true. Stoned drivers are a lot safer than drunk ones, new federal data shows. I don't know if they're looking at this here to try to bring in these new laws. It's like this article came out February 9, 2015. It's a 3-year-old article. No one's referencing it in the world of trying to bust people for this. Says a new study from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, so it's not even a bunch of stoners sitting around a bong, finds that drivers who use marijuana are at a significantly lower risk for crash than drivers who use it. Alcohol. And after adjusting for age, gender, race, and alcohol use, drivers who tested positive for marijuana were no more likely to crash than those who had not used any drugs or alcohol prior to driving. So what's the de facto response? Arrest us. From theglobeandmail.com. We were just talking about this with Nathan. No pesticide testing done for medical marijuana, Health Canada says. So they want to test a guy for smoking it or using it while he's driving. They want to tell us that he's impaired even if he's not. And they're also going to tell us they don't bother to test for it. They don't test these things. Now, I'm not worried about that with Nathan, based on what he just said here today. They don't even use that stuff. They have a different system. Spray the roots while they hang loose. But Health Canada doesn't. You can't expect them to test for pesticides. They don't give a shit. This is from last year, a year ago. Facing a growing controversy over tainted medical marijuana, Health Canada cannot say with certainty how widespread the use of banned pesticides is within the industry. They can tell you have to buy from them. They can tell you there's no other place to get it. They can tell you they're going to arrest the dispensaries, but they don't bother checking for this shit. You're on your own. They care about you so much. It's a completely backwards way to look at it, especially when you consider Ireland now. We had Vera Toomey on the show, the mother with the child who's been suffering greatly from seizures, Dravet syndrome. No longer, because she uses cannabis, managed to strong-arm some kind of permit so she could stay at home and use it instead of incurring expenses traveling to Amsterdam and other places in Europe. Says here, opposition to medical cannabis is misguided, say doctors. Proponents say political fear and misinformation behind states' failure to allow drug. Now, this is from Ireland last year, but you could lay that across any jurisdiction around the world. Political fear and misinformation is behind the state's failure to allow the drug. Puritanical zeal, misinformation, and fear are at the root of the medical and political establishment's reluctance to legalize cannabis for medical purposes, 3 doctors have said. The absence of legislation has caused unnecessary suffering among thousands of patients with a range of conditions, including cancer, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, and chronic pain. The doctors were speaking at a press conference organized by People Before Profit. TD Gino Kenny He's authored a bill aimed at legalizing medicinal cannabis. The private member's bill remains on the Dial agenda. That's the legislature there. I'm pronouncing it wrong. I'm sorry. Despite the Committee on Health saying it's legally flawed. Professor Mike Barnes, a neurologist and rehab physician in the UK, highlighted dozens of peer-reviewed research papers that have proved the efficacy of medical cannabis. Hey, that's it. We're done. It's proved. Shut up with your anecdotal friggin' crybabies who keep saying that over and over again. So that's in Ireland. Pretty cool stuff. They're shaking it up over there. Vera Toomey has so much to do with that going through. And people like her. And you'd think, oh, good for Vera. Isn't that nice? She's helping her little girl, Ava, get better by using this medicine. You would think these folks would learn a lesson. But here we go. Back to England now. You won't believe this until you hear it. What did I just say about this cannabis? What did I just say? Now, they figured it out in Ireland, but in the Home Office is denying medical cannabis pleas for a boy aged 6, Alfie Dingley. They also had to move to the Netherlands for his cannabis treatment. Now, why is this? What's going on with these people? So here's Alfie in bed here. I'm not going to show this, but he has hundreds of seizures a day.
To go through that once would be traumatizing, but we're going through it sometimes every 7 to 10 days, and it's just absolutely horrendous.
That's his mother talking about his seizure, and they've only been using steroids, but unfortunately the steroids have serious side effects.
Our doctor recently said to us if we carry on giving him intravenous steroids as we are, that he will have episodes of psychosis or become psychotic,
Which is exactly what they say happens to you when you use cannabis. It's the exact opposite. These idiots are looking through the wrong end of the telescope. They're saying, what's that little tiny pinhead of light over there? That's nothing up there. Turn it around, it's the friggin' moon. These are the same complaints they tell you about why they won't legalize cannabis and what the problem with it is. So they give him a drug, a steroid, which is okay in the beginning, like almost every drug. Well, it certainly changes things, helps you out a little bit, and then it's too much after a while. So they've been asking in England for a medical cannabis license to help Alfie Dingley from Kenilworth in Warwickshire. He has 30 violent seizures a day, hundreds a week. His parents want to treat him with the oil. It's illegal, though, and it's not helpful. These people sicken me. Says the drug cannot be practically prescribed, administered, or supplied to the public, says the Home Office. Bullshit. Why do these people say such demonstrably untrue things? I think because of the root word monster. I know that's not really the root word, but it sounds the same. And, this kid is unbelievable to me. This is another kid who's doing fantastically well when he's allowed to have access to this medicine, which the government says it can't be done. Which is incredible. They want to arrest them and get rid of these folks from using this thing that can't be done because it works. So, of course, the mother is criticizing the decision to defy cannabis. We talked about this already. In England, in Ireland, in Australia. Seizures know no international boundaries. There's no reason to keep this particular substance out of the hands of people who are drastically improving the lives and the fortunes of their children. Some of them would die without it. We need to stop this by getting this word out. The problem with it is that a lot of times somebody will start growing something and then they lose control of it. This is another thing Justin Trudeau and the team of cops running legalization don't seem to care about. U.S. tobacco supplier acquires the majority stakes in a Prince Edward Island, Ontario, and in Ontario pot companies. It's in the Guardian.pe.ca. Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. Beautiful place. Says here, a U.S. tobacco leaf merchant. Get out of here with your garbage. Has acquired majority stakes in a PEI licensed medical marijuana producer and cannabis company that is developing indoor growing ops in Ontario. Alliance One International, based in North Carolina. tobacco country, says its subsidiary, Canadian Cultivated Products, acquired a 75% share. This is the problem. A lot of cool people are doing some great things, and then they get absorbed. Let's hope Nathan does not get taken over by some rambunctious American company. So while we get ready to wind down the show, wrap things up for another week here on Green Crush Conspiracy Queries, I have to wonder how much further these lies are going to take us. First of all, you have to consume it at home here in Ontario, but sensible Ontario. I love the way they always use the word sensible, because it is. It's just a simple little word. They're bringing the fight for Ontario cannabis lounges to the people, which is a great idea considering the law says you got to smoke it at home, you got to eat it at home, do it at home, don't go anywhere else. Just take home a boring little box, just do it at home. Because we care about the children, if the children are home, well, you got to do it there anyway. Stupid series of laws. So we are trying to get cannabis lounges, speakeasies, together in the face of the OxyContin creator expanding into the pot industry. What the hell is this? This is from 2 years ago, a year and a half. Emblem Cannabis was cleared by the federal government to sell medical marijuana, attract new investors, and they want to change the face of the industry. These are the folks that also make OxyContin. Amazing. So I don't know why folks like this are allowed to continue with their basic existence. I mean, really. Okay, a couple more pieces here we got to get into. Says a survey shows nearly half of people using CBD stopped taking prescription and traditional medications. Ouch! More reason to shut this thing down, huh? Big business. You can either participate in a company like JWC, Nathan Woodruff, and or make your own stuff, and or use the source to make your own extracts. Overcome your cannabinoid deficiency. Feel better about your life. And understand that while a lot of these legalizations are going forward, such as in San Francisco, Colorado, you're going to free people and erase their previous convictions of cannabis usage, because it just doesn't make sense to keep that going, right? Once you've realized this stuff is good, you can't really leave somebody with a criminal record. Hey, Justin? Hey, Bill Blair? I'll close out with this little article. This is from thetelegraph.co.uk in the science section. It says chemotherapy may spread cancer and trigger more aggressive tumors, warn scientists. According to a new study from summertime 2017, researchers in the U.S. studied the impact of drugs on patients with breast cancer and found medication increases the chance of cancer cells migrating to other parts of the body, where they are almost always lethal. Hey, it's not really a commercial for cancer, but it's a commercial. Keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open. Understand that you are the author of your future. Do not hang on to any notion or prescription from someone who tells you that this stuff doesn't work. Doesn't work for everybody all the time, but nothing does. And it's well worth your investigative efforts to look at some substance that grows in the ground, even if Nathan grows them hanging in the air. I can't wait to see that. You can access this stuff and you can turn it around. I used some fantastic stuff that grew in dirt. So I'm sure if Nathan's product is even more rotund and robust than that, good on him. But don't deny yourself this particular substance because you don't have access to a legal outlet just yet. This is Green Crush Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park, and we will return next week with another show dedicated to the work, research, and life of Dr. Sam Malachi, who was set to join us next week and unfortunately cannot do that. Our guest, Paul Hartman, will tell us all about it, what's going on with Sam, and it's going to be a fantastic show. So do come back next week for episode 102, episode 30. Thanks very much.
Hi, I'm Timmy.
And I'm Mary Jane. He's the newbie.
She's the doobie. And this is the show
where we
tote
cannabis.
Talk.
From both sides.
Is that even possible?
Cannabis Broadcasting Group here at cbgtv.com.